Imagine you're standing on your home island, right? A beautiful tropical atoll just sitting there in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And you wake up one morning, you step outside, and something completely bizarre is happening. It looks like, well, looks like it's snowing right there in the tropics.
Which is impossible, obviously.
Right. But you see these white flakes falling steadily from the sky. They're dusting the palm trees. They're coating the sandy ground, sticking to the roofs of houses.
Wow.
And kids are running out to play in it, catching flakes on their tongues, just marveling at this grit settling on their skin. But it isn't snow.
No, it definitely isn't.
It is pulverized, highly radioactive coral and ash raining down from a thermonuclear explosion. Imagine the sheer, just dawning horror of realizing what that powdery white blanket actually is and what it's actively doing to your body.
It's terrifying to even picture.
It really is. Welcome to today's Deep Dive. It is May 10th, 2026, and today we're venturing into some truly murky historical waters by unpacking a single, incredibly dense Wikipedia article about something called Project 4.1.
Yeah, we're looking at a medical study that sits right at the very uncomfortable intersection of Cold War science and medical ethics. Our mission today is to unpack the reality of what happened to the residents of the Marshall Islands after that devastating nuclear test in 1954. We're going to examine the highly controversial paper trail left behind by the United States government.
And really look at the terrifying ways that clinical data gathering can sometimes just completely overshadow basic human rights.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. The inciting incident here, the whole reason that radioactive snow was falling in the first place was a weapons test. March 1st, 1954.
Right, the Castle Bravo test.
Right. The United States detonated a nuclear device at Bikini Atoll.
And the official historical accounts state that the explosive yield of that Castle Bravo bomb was unexpectedly massive. I mean, it was far more powerful than the military scientists had calculated.
Right.
And because of that miscalculation, a gigantic fallout plume spread dangerous, highly radioactive material over an area spanning more than 100 miles.
100 miles?
Yeah, 100 miles. It completely blanketed several inhabited islands that were supposed to be, well outside the danger zone.
But the timeline of what happens next is where the story really shifts. It stops being a story purely about a bomb, and it becomes a story about a medical study.
Yes, it shifts very fast.
Because the U.S. government organized a response to this disaster with a speed that is, frankly, hard to wrap your head around. Less than a week later...
We're talking March 6th or 7th, 1954.
Right, less than a week. A medical research program was hastily organized and tucked under the broader Biomedical Effects Division of the Castle Bravo testing program. They called it Project 4.1.
The official title in the documentation was The Study of Response of Human Beings Exposed to Significant Beta and Gamma Radiation Due to Fallout from High-Yield Weapons.
Got you.
Very bureaucratic, yeah. The military brought in a man named Eugene P. Cronkite from the National Naval Medical Center and basically named him the project officer. And the very first thing Cronkite did upon taking command was lock the entire operation down behind a wall of strict classification.
His instructions are logged right there in the sources.
Yeah.
And they are chilling. I mean, the project was immediately classified as secret restricted data.
Right.
Cronkite explicitly instructed his personnel to fear what he termed adverse public reaction.
Which tells you a lot about their priorities.
Totally. He ordered his medical and scientific staff not to discuss the purpose or the background or even the findings of their work with anyone unless they had a strictly defined need to know.
And that level of secrecy, it's an immediate red flag when you're ostensibly dealing with a public health crisis.
Right, because you have civilian populations exposed to deadly fallout.
Exactly. Yet the primary concern dictated from the top is managing public relations and controlling data.
It's wild.
If you look at a later Defense Nuclear Agency report, one published in 1982, it actually outlines the official threefold purpose of Project 4.1.
Okay, what were they?
First, evaluate the severity of the radiation injury to the human beings exposed. Second, provide for all necessary medical care. And third, conduct a scientific study of radiation injuries to human beings.
I really have to push back on that threefold purpose.
How so?
When you strip away the bureaucratic language, isn't evaluating the severity of an injury and conducting a scientific study of that injury basically the exact same thing, just with a different coat of paint?
It's definitely a blurry line.
It sounds like a doctor treating a car crash victim in the emergency room but simultaneously using that patient as a crash test dummy to author a research paper on blunt force trauma.
Wow.
You know, you are treating them, sure, but you're also actively extracting data from their suffering.
The tension you're describing is the central conflict of this entire historical event. Consider the sheer scale of the mobilization required to extract that data. The logistics involved are staggering.
Right.
In 1954, you don't just snap your fingers and have a fully operational scientific task force in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
No, of course not.
Yet within days, they coordinated efforts from the Naval Medical Research Institute, the Naval Radiological Defense Laboratory, and Los Alamos National Laboratory.
it's massive.
They scrambled 3 entire U.S. Navy ships, the USS Nicholas, the USS Renshaw, and the USS Philip. To deploy that kind of massive military and scientific apparatus in less than a week requires an astonishing level of rapid coordination.
Think about the scale of this, though. We aren't just talking about a handful of people catching a stray radioactive breeze on a single beach.
No, it was widespread.
The final Project 4.1 report logs 239 Marshallese people impacted across 3 completely different atolls, Utirik, Rongelap, and Eilingene.
Yes.
And there were also 28 American military personnel stationed on a 4th atoll, Rongerik, who were engulfed by the plume.
The radiation doses absorbed by those populations varied wildly, though, depending on geography and wind patterns. To understand the severity, we need to talk about RADS.
Right, RADS.
Which is a unit used to measure the amount of radiation energy absorbed by the human body. A standard modern chest X-ray exposes you to a tiny microscopic fraction of a single rad.
Barely anything.
Exactly. Now, the folks on Utirik received an estimated dose of 14 rads. The Americans on Rongerik took an average dose of 78 rads.
Oof.
The people on Eilingene received 69 rads.
But Rongelap Atoll took the absolute brunt of the fallout. The residents there absorbed approximately 175 rads of radiation before the military finally arrived to evacuate them.
175 rads.
A systemic bombardment of 175 rads to the cellular structure is, it's devastating.
The immediate physical symptoms of that kind of exposure were horrific, while most didn't show the classic signs of acute radiation sickness.
Like the immediate violent vomiting.
Right, but within days, other severe effects manifested. We're talking about total spontaneous hair loss. People were developing raw, weeping skin lesions all over their bodies.
And the military sources refer to these lesions as beta burns. To understand a beta burn, you have to realize that this isn't like an X-ray that just passes harmlessly through your tissue and disappears.
No.
That radioactive coral ash we talked about earlier physically stuck to their damp skin. It's essentially like leaving a hot iron resting on a cotton shirt.
That's a great way to put it.
The radioactive material doesn't pass through. It sits right there on the surface, continuously emitting energy and burning the tissue until it is rigorously scrubbed off.
Yet the sources note that these immediate visible external lesions actually healed relatively quickly once the populations were decontaminated and treated.
Okay.
And this leads to a profoundly baffling piece of historical documentation.
Okay.
The initial government abstract for Project 4.1 confidently concluded that there is no long-term hazard for the exposed population.
No long-term hazard.
That's what it said.
How does a team of top-tier military scientists, literally some of the most educated radiation experts on the planet at that time, look at a population of people whose hair is falling out in clumps, who are covered in weeping radioactive burns, and write an official report concluding no long-term hazard? It completely defies basic logic.
It really does.
It forces you to wonder if they were just blinded by their own hypotheses or if they were deliberately minimizing the reality to avoid that adverse public reaction Cronkite was so terrified of.
Well, whatever the motivation behind that conclusion, the passage of time proved it tragically, devastatingly wrong. For the first decade, the clinical data was somewhat ambiguous.
Okay.
Although it is a matter of record that miscarriages and stillbirths doubled for the women of Rongelap in the first 5 years alone before returning to normal rates.
Double, God.
But as the decades ticked by, the delayed effects of the radiation became impossible to ignore.
Yeah, the children who played in that radioactive snow began developing thyroid cancer at wildly disproportionate rates. And the mechanism behind that is so insidious.
Extremely.
The fallout was packed with radioactive isotopes, particularly radioiodines. And the human body, specifically the thyroid gland, is desperate for iodine. It absorbs it like a sponge.
Right.
But the body cannot tell the difference between normal, healthy iodine and radioactive iodine. So when these children breathed the air and drank the water, Their thyroids pulled in the radioactive ash and locked it there.
They essentially planted microscopic time bombs in their own throats.
Exactly, irradiating themselves from the inside out.
The rates of illness skyrocketed. By 1974, almost a third of the exposed population had developed neoplasms, which are abnormal tissue growths and tumors.
A third.
And the projections only grew more grim. By 2010, researchers calculated that a projected 55% of all cancers among the 82 people originally exposed from Ronchap and Alingene were directly attributable to this specific radioactive fallout from 1954.
Over half of their cancer cases traced back to a single miscalculated bomb blast.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to contrast the long-term fate of the Marshallese with another group exposed to the Castle Bravo fallout.
How the Japanese fishermen.
Yes, the crew aboard the boat, Daigo Fukuryu Maru. Those fishermen experienced much more severe immediate radiation sickness because they were closer to the blast.
Right.
However, after the event, they were decontaminated and returned to Japan to a clean environment. The Marshallese, on the other hand, were subjected to a subsistence lifestyle on relocated, contaminated testing sites, places like Bikini, Enwetak, and Rongelat.
And a contaminated environment doesn't just wash clean in the rain.
No, it doesn't.
The radioactive isotopes seep deep into the soil and the groundwater. The root systems of the local flora, like coconut trees, pull up that contaminated water.
Right.
So the coconuts become radioactive.
Yeah.
The local animals eat the vegetation, and they become radioactive.
It's cyclical.
When the relocated Marshallese people were forced to survive on local food and water, the radiation concentrated as it moved up the food chain. Every bite of food and every sip of water was actively compounding their internal exposure for years.
When you have an entire population facing those kinds of compounding lifelong health crises, and you contrast that suffering with the meticulous clinical data gathering performed by the military, the scrutiny naturally turns to the intent of the people holding the clipboards.
Right.
It leads to the darkest question raised by the historical records. Was this massive exposure truly an accident, or was it premeditated?
Now, before we delve into the paper trail on this, we need to set a strict boundary for this deep dive.
Good idea.
We are remaining completely neutral on this specific controversy. We are not endorsing the accusation that the U.S. government purposefully irradiated these people, nor are we validating the government's official defense that it was purely a tragic accident. Our job today is strictly to report the claims, the counterclaims, and the historical documents exactly as they appear in the source material, and let you evaluate the evidence yourself.
Well said. And the source material shows without a doubt that the Marshallese people felt they were being exploited.
Oh, for sure.
Even an internal Department of Energy report later acknowledged that the dual purpose of providing medical care while simultaneously conducting rigorous scientific research led the Marshallese to feel they were being used as guinea pigs in a vast radiation experiment.
That deep-seated feeling of exploitation eventually boiled over into public official accusations. In 1972, a Micronesian representative named Ataji Balos stood before the Congress of Micronesia and made a stunning charge.
He really did.
He publicly claimed that the exposure of his people was not an accident at all. He alleged that the Atomic Energy Commission intentionally exposed the Marshallese so the military could develop medical capabilities for treating radiation sickness in the event of a global nuclear war with the Soviet Union.
Balos did not mince words regarding why he believed his people were targeted. According to a U.S. internal transcription of his speech, he claimed the U.S. chose to use his people as test subjects because of their marginal political status on the global stage.
Yeah.
He explicitly stated it was, and I quote, because they are not white but some brown natives in some remote Pacific islands.
Wow.
He further categorized the ongoing medical treatment they were receiving from the military as highly questionable. The Atomic Energy Commission and the broader U.S. government firmly and repeatedly denied these charges.
Right.
They maintained, as all mainstream historical accounts continue to do, that the massive fallout was purely a tragic miscalculation in the bomb's design. The official narrative points to the final Project 4.1 report, which specifically opens with a preface stating that Operation Castle did not originally include a biomedical program at all.
Okay.
The government asserts the medical study was entirely ad hoc, just thrown together in a sheer panic after the wind shifted and the bomb yielded a larger explosion than anyone anticipated. And that narrative held firm for decades. The story was one of unexpected tragedy followed by rapid medical response.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Fast forward from the 1950s all the way to 1994.
Okay.
Researchers combing through declassified archives discover a Castle Bravo program prospectus from 1953.
1953.
Exactly. This is a highly detailed planning document dated before the bomb was ever detonated. And right there, nestled in the 1953 planning document, is a direct reference to Project 4.1.
It is a staggering piece of paper to find. A biomedical study on human fallout exposure, explicitly listed in the operational planning documents before the unexpected fallout ever happened.
The government's immediate response to this 1994 discovery was a clerical defense. They claimed that someone had gone back into the project list after the Castle Bravo test and simply inserted Project 4.1 into the older 1953 document for administrative and accounting reasons.
Right.
Therefore, they argued, the presence of the project in the 1953 file did not prove premeditation. But put yourself in the shoes of someone evaluating that claim.
It's tough.
If your house burned down and you filed a massive insurance claim, and then the insurance investigator found a date-stamped receipt for a heavy-duty fire extinguisher you bought the day before the fire.
Oh, man.
And your defense was, oh, I just went back and inserted that into my old receipts later for tax purposes. Would any insurance company on earth buy that excuse?
It is a highly convenient administrative explanation for a deeply incriminating piece of paper, and it is entirely understandable why that explanation breeds generational skepticism.
Yeah.
While the mainstream consensus among historians remains that the Castle Bravo fallout was a horrific miscalculation rather than a deliberate plot, the legacy of mistrust is profound.
Absolutely.
The United States relocated hundreds of people, rendered entire ancestral atolls uninhabitable for generations, and repeatedly failed to operate with transparency. In that historical context, the skepticism of the Marshallese people isn't just understandable, it is a completely rational, logical response to their treatment.
Which brings us to the undeniable ethical reality of the medical response. Because frankly, whether the initial exposure was a terrible accident or a deliberate conspiracy almost ceases to matter when you analyze how the government behaved after the ash fell.
That's a very fair point.
Even if we accept the narrative of a pure accident, the subsequent scientific opportunism involved undeniable ethical failures.
Regardless of the intent behind the Castle Bravo explosion, there is zero dispute in the historical record on one fundamental fact. The United States carefully, meticulously, and continuously studied the exposed Marshallese people for decades without ever obtaining informed consent.
Not once. They never sat these people down through a translator and said, you are part of a classified scientific study now.
Never.
If you're a Marshallese person getting medical treatment from a military doctor, you assume you're a patient. But you have absolutely no idea that your blood work, the photographs of your skin lesions, and the developmental milestones of your children are being aggressively logged into a classified military database.
It's a huge violation.
It strips away the dignity of the individual. You're offering them medical care, yes, but if they don't know they're generating data for weapons researchers, are they actually a patient? Or are they just a petri dish with a pulse?
Sadly, the historical context shows this was not an isolated incident of medical paternalism. The sources point out that the handling of the Marshallese reflects much broader systemic ethical lapses driven by Cold War paranoia.
Right.
The government was terrified of a nuclear exchange with the Soviets and desperately needed data on human survivability. That desperation overrode basic ethics, mirroring the same lack of consent seen in other secret human radiation experiments conducted by the Atomic Energy Commission throughout the 1940s and 1950s programs that only saw the light of day after the Cold War ended.
There is a quote in the source material from Barton C. Hacker, who served as the official historian of U.S. nuclear testing exposures. His analysis of the military's mindset during Project 4.1 is incredibly bleak.
What's fascinating here is how Hacker focuses on the cold, opportunistic nature of the military's response. He notes that the Atomic Energy Commission quickly realized that studying these victims could be of immense medical and strategic value. So yes, they evacuated them, and yes, they treated them medically, but the rigorous scientific studies began instantly.
Immediately.
Hacker points out that Project 4.1 gathered what he terms otherwise unobtainable data on the human consequences of high radiation exposures.
Otherwise unobtainable data. That phrase really anchors the tragedy, because you cannot ethically put a healthy human being in a room and blast them with 175 rads of radiation just to measure how fast their thyroid fails.
No, you definitely cannot.
You can't legally generate that data. But if it happens accidentally due to a wind shift, suddenly you possess a biological data set of incalculable value.
Right.
Hacker even compares the Marshallese to the American radium dial painters of the 1920s who
Oh,
ingested radioactive paint on factory floors, and to the Japanese victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945.
it's the same pattern.
Through immense personal tragedy, they inadvertently provided the military with a goldmine of biological data.
And we must recognize that this data didn't just stay hidden in a locked filing cabinet at the Pentagon for military eyes only. The results of Project 4.1 were written up, formalized, and widely disseminated to the medical community.
Wow.
By 1955, the authors of the study were actively publishing their findings in prestigious mainstream professional journals. For example, the clinical data extracted from the Marshallese appeared right there in the Journal of the American Medical Association, commonly known as JAMA, for doctors around the world to read and learn from.
So what does this all mean?
Hmm.
When we step back and look at the entirety of Project 4.1, the blast, the rapid mobilization, the horrific symptoms, the lack of consent, and the published data, what we're really looking at is a chilling reminder of human vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
It shows us exactly how quickly the line between necessary medical care and opportunistic scientific exploitation can blur into nothingness. All it takes is the removal of two foundational pillars, transparency and consent. Once you remove those, a doctor can seamlessly become a data harvester, and a patient can become an experiment, all justified under the heavy cloak of national security.
It is a profoundly dark chapter of history, but it leaves us with a critical question about the nature of medical progress itself. As we just discussed, the data gathered from the non-consenting Marshallese subjects was published in major medical journals like JAMA.
Right.
That means the clinical observations made during Project 4.1 likely helped form the foundational understanding of modern radiation medicine. So here's a thought for you to ponder on your own as you go about your week. How should modern medicine grapple with the reality that some of the life-saving radiation therapies we rely on today might be built directly upon the unconsented suffering of islanders from 1954?
That's a huge question.
Does the mere passage of time wash that clinical data clean, or is that foundational medical knowledge permanently stained by the traumatic way it was acquired?
That is a heavy, essential question to walk away with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the historical records of Project 4.1. As always, keep reading, keep questioning the official narratives, and keep looking closely at the sources around you. We'll see you next time.